Welcome back to our channel World of Royals. It was meant to be the moment everything finally turned in his favor. The day Prince Harry would walk into a London courtroom, confront the British tabloids head-on, and prove that he had been right all along. This was supposed to be the payoff. The long-awaited vindication. The moment where the truth came out and the world watched him stand tall. That is not what happened. What unfolded inside the High Court wasn't a victory. It was a collapse. And it didn't happen slowly. Within hours, the image Harry had built for years began to fall apart in full public view. Instead of exposing the press, he exposed himself. Instead of controlling the narrative, he lost control of the room. His voice shook. His composure cracked. At one point, he appeared on the verge of tears. And the man whose approval mattered most in that moment, the judge, was forced to reprimand him not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. This wasn't just a bad day in court. It was the systematic dismantling of Prince Harry's credibility. As Harry sat in London describing the misery of his life and the pain he claims the press inflicted on him, a very different image was emerging thousands of miles away. His wife, Meghan Markle, was in California, calm, comfortable, and publicly active, sharing glimpses of a lifestyle that seemed completely disconnected from the emotional devastation Harry was describing under oath. What was meant to be a multi-million-dollar legal reckoning quickly began to look like a public relations nightmare. And as details from inside the courtroom emerged, it became clear this case was far more damaging and far more revealing than anyone expected. The mood shifted the moment Prince Harry took the witness stand. This was not a television interview. There was no sympathetic host, no nodding audience, no carefully prepared soundbites. This was a courtroom. Cold, formal, unforgiving. And presiding over it was Justice Matthew Nicklin, a judge known for facts, evidence, and precision, not emotion or personal grievance. Almost immediately, Harry made a critical mistake. Rather than answering the questions put to him by the defense lawyer, Anthony Hudson, Harry began to argue. He pushed back. He challenged the premise of the questions. He tried to debate legal definitions and journalistic practices with experienced barristers whose job was to dismantle his case piece by piece. That approach might work in a press statement. It might even work in a documentary. But in a courtroom, it's disastrous. At first, the judge tried to rein things in gently. He reminded Harry that his role was simple: answer the questions. The arguments were for his legal team, not him. But Harry didn't adjust. He continued to spar, to resist, to explain instead of respond. The second interruption came quickly, the judge's patience clearly thinning. The tension in the room was no longer subtle. By the third time Harry attempted to argue over what qualified as a journalistic source, Justice Nicklin shut it down completely. Firmly. Publicly. There would be no more debate. It was a jarring sight. A prince of the realm being spoken to like a defiant schoolboy, not because of who he was, but because he refused to accept how the courtroom works. But this wasn't just arrogance on display. It was something else. It was panic. The day before Harry took the stand, the defense team executed a strategic move that left him visibly rattled. They shortened their opening arguments and forced him into testimony a full day earlier than expected. He hadn't had time to settle. He hadn't had time to prepare mentally. And it showed. From the moment questioning began, Harry looked uneasy. His answers wandered. His tone shifted. He appeared emotionally charged and off balance. The defense team saw it immediately, and they pressed hard. Instead of calmly presenting evidence, Harry fell into the trap of arguing with the process itself. And every time he did, it weakened him further. And then, as damaging as his behavior was, what he actually said under oath began to create even bigger problems. As the questioning continued, Harry's testimony took an unexpected and confusing turn. His voice cracked as he spoke about how the tabloids had, in his words, made his wife's life an absolute misery. He talked about intrusion, about pain, about suffering, about how deeply it had affected Meghan. On the surface, it sounded like a husband defending the woman he loves. But there was one massive problem. Meghan Markle has nothing to do with this case. The lawsuit focuses on alleged phone hacking and illegal information gathering that occurred between 2001 and 2013. That timeline is fixed. Harry didn't meet Meghan until 2016. She wasn't part of his life during the period in question. She wasn't involved in the alleged wrongdoing. She wasn't referenced in the articles at the center of the case. And yet, Harry placed her at the emotional center of his testimony. To legal observers, this raised immediate red flags. Why introduce someone who is completely irrelevant to the time frame of the alleged crimes? Why shift the focus away from evidence and toward present-day emotional grievances? The answer many began to suspect was uncomfortable, because the evidence from that earlier period wasn't strong enough on its own. By invoking Meghan, Harry appeared to be fighting a proxy war, not for what happened years ago, but for how he feels now. And in doing so, he didn't strengthen his case. He exposed it. This was no longer beginning to look like a precise legal challenge rooted in proof. It was starting to resemble a deeply personal venting session, dressed up as a lawsuit. And that perception would only grow stronger when the world noticed what Meghan was doing at that exact same moment. While Prince Harry stood alone in a London courtroom, struggling through hostile questioning and reliving what he described as the worst moments of his life, the misery he spoke about seemed strangely absent in one very specific place: Montecito, California. As reports from the High Court spread, so did something else. Meghan Markle was active online. Very active. Images began circulating of her showcasing a life that looked calm, polished, and prosperous. Sunlit views. A pristine mansion. A swimming pool. Carefully curated snapshots of comfort and success, shared while her husband was thousands of miles away under immense legal and emotional pressure. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy and tense. Gray walls. Legal formality. A prince being questioned, corrected, and publicly restrained by a judge. Outside of it, or rather across the ocean, the image was one of ease and control. The optics could not have been worse. This is a couple that has spent years branding themselves as inseparable. Salt and pepper, as they famously put it. Always moving together. Always united. Their post-royal identity has been built on the idea of standing shoulder to shoulder against adversity. But when the pressure reached its highest point, Harry was alone. There was no Meghan in the gallery. No visible show of support during breaks. No reassuring presence when the questioning became aggressive and personal. Just Harry, isolated, emotional, and clearly overwhelmed, navigating a legal system he didn't seem to fully understand, while his wife managed her public image from the safety of California. The reaction online was immediate and brutal. Comment sections filled with the same uncomfortable question: if Meghan is the source of so much of Harry's pain, and the reason he says this fight matters so deeply, why does she appear completely detached from it? Why, at the very moment he is describing unbearable misery under oath, does her public life project anything but misery? The disconnect fueled a growing narrative that has followed Harry for years, that he is the one fighting, sacrificing, and absorbing the damage, while Meghan remains insulated from the fallout. That he is the foot soldier sent into battle while the general stays far from the front lines. The juxtaposition was striking. Harry, visibly emotional, speaking about how broken they are. Meghan, posting a version of life that looked curated, luxurious, and stable. For many observers, it didn't make Harry look like a partner in a united marriage. It made him look like someone trying desperately to prove his worth, fighting a war that may not even be shared. And the emotional confusion didn't stop there. Because the structure of the case forced Harry to reopen a chapter of his life that had nothing to do with Meghan at all, and everything to do with a woman who has spent more than a decade trying to stay out of the spotlight. Due to the strict timeline of the lawsuit, the real figure at the center of the alleged privacy invasions wasn't Meghan Markle. It was Chelsea Davy. She was the one dating Harry during the period in question. She was the one chased by photographers. She was the one whose private life was allegedly targeted by the tabloids. And she was the one who ultimately walked away from Harry, not because she didn't love him, but because she couldn't handle the constant intrusion and chaos of royal life. Chelsea has since moved on quietly. She married. She had children. She built a successful business. And for over a decade, she has maintained a dignified silence. Until now. In a moment that stunned many watching the trial, Harry admitted under oath that he had called Chelsea the night before his testimony. He pulled her back into a legal and emotional storm she had deliberately escaped years ago. And then, in court, he spoke about her with a level of emotion that caught people off guard. There was regret in his words. sadness, a lingering sense of loss. He described a relationship that he believes was destroyed by the press, a claim that may hold truth, but the way he spoke about it raised eyebrows. Not because of what he said, but because of what it revealed. By centering Chelsea in his testimony, Harry unintentionally highlighted a painful contrast. One woman wanted privacy and achieved it by leaving. The other has built a global brand on visibility, media deals, and constant exposure. And yet, Harry's crusade for privacy seemed to be causing collateral damage to the very people who had chosen peace over publicity. For many viewers, it felt deeply unfair. Chelsea didn't ask to be dragged back into headlines in 2026. She didn't consent to her past being reopened to support a lawsuit she isn't part of. And it appeared hypocritical for Harry to demand respect for privacy while invading someone else's to strengthen his case. What was framed as a fight for justice was beginning to look messy, emotionally reckless, and self-serving. And just when it seemed the situation couldn't get more uncomfortable, the defense team was preparing to deliver the most damaging blow of all, using Harry's own words against him. The most devastating weapon the Daily Mail's legal team brought into that courtroom wasn't a secret witness or a hidden document. It was something far more powerful. It was Prince Harry himself. Standing in the witness box, Harry made a declaration that instantly changed the tone of the trial. He stated, plainly and without hesitation, that he had never believed his life should be treated as open season for commercialization. He argued that his private life was sacred, that no one had the right to sell stories about him, that what the press had done was morally wrong. The courtroom went quiet, because everyone in that room, and everyone watching from the outside, knew the problem with that statement. Prince Harry has made millions doing exactly what he now claims to oppose. The defense didn't need to raise their voices or attack his character. They simply pointed to the public record. Harry published a 400-page memoir, Spare, revealing some of the most intimate details of his life and the lives of his family members. He shared private text messages. He described deeply personal moments, including his first sexual experience. He detailed family arguments, medical information, and internal royal tensions that were never meant for public consumption. He then signed major deals with streaming platforms. A Netflix series that opened the doors to his home. A globally broadcast interview with Oprah. Podcast projects. Speaking engagements. Carefully packaged personal revelations sold for enormous sums of money. In that context, Harry's claim that he opposed the commercialization of his private life didn't just fall flat. It collapsed. The defense didn't need to argue. The contradiction spoke for itself. You cannot profit from selling your own privacy to the highest bidder and then claim moral outrage when others discuss your life. The public reaction was immediate and unforgiving. This wasn't about privacy anymore. It was about control. The perception hardened quickly. Harry doesn't want privacy, he wants exclusivity. He wants to be the only one allowed to tell his story. The only one allowed to profit from it. And he wants the legal system to silence anyone who presents a version of events he doesn't approve of. That realization struck at the heart of his entire case. But beyond image and hypocrisy, there was an even more serious issue emerging under cross-examination. Because in a courtroom, emotions don't matter. Belief doesn't matter. Memory doesn't matter. Only evidence does. And this is where Harry's case began to unravel structurally. When asked to provide proof that specific articles were the result of phone hacking, Harry repeatedly relied on phrases like, "I believe," or "it seems likely." His argument was based on suspicion, the idea that because information was private, it must have been obtained illegally. That assumption is not evidence. The defense methodically dismantled this line of thinking. Article by article, they demonstrated that much of the information Harry claimed was stolen had actually come from legitimate sources. Some details had been released in official palace statements. Others came from public appearances Harry had forgotten about. In some cases, the information appeared to have come from people within his own circle, friends or acquaintances who spoke to journalists willingly. Emails were produced. Records were cited. Timelines were laid out. The implication was brutal. Not every negative story was the result of hacking. Not every intrusion was illegal. And the long-held belief that Harry had been constantly monitored and bugged may not align with the documented facts. This revelation didn't just weaken his case. It threatened it entirely. Legal experts watching the trial began to understand why rumors started circulating that Harry's own legal team was growing uneasy. Lawyers have a duty to the court. They cannot knowingly pursue a case built on speculation or unsupported claims. If a client insists on a narrative the evidence can't sustain, the lawyers are placed in an impossible position. Reports suggested that members of Harry's legal team were distancing themselves, aware that the foundation of the case was crumbling. Not because of public opinion, but because the proof simply wasn't there. And if the case failed, the consequences wouldn't just be emotional or reputational. They would be financial. Catastrophic financial. Hanging over this entire trial is a number that gives real weight to everything happening in that courtroom. $38 million. That is the estimated total cost Harry could be facing if he loses, including his own legal fees and the possibility of having to pay the defense's costs as well. Under British law, the losing side often covers both. And Associated Newspapers hasn't held back. They've hired some of the most expensive and experienced legal minds in the country. If Harry loses, he won't just walk away embarrassed. He could be writing a check to the very organization he has spent years condemning. And while Harry has earned significant money since leaving the royal family, how much of that remains liquid is unclear. The Montecito lifestyle is not cheap. Private security alone costs millions a year. Add in travel, staff, property expenses, and a massive mortgage, and the burn rate becomes staggering. The Spotify deal is gone. The future of the Netflix partnership is uncertain, with reports of projects being cancelled or underperforming. Book advances don't last forever. And a legal loss of this size could erase a large portion of what Harry and Meghan gained in exchange for walking away from royal life. Suddenly, this case looks less like a moral stand and more like a high-stakes gamble. That financial pressure helps explain Harry's behavior on the stand. The agitation. The defensiveness. The emotional swings. He doesn't just want to win, he may need to. He needs vindication. He needs confirmation that this long-running battle was worth it. And he may also need the financial relief a settlement or victory could provide. But the problem is the hand he's playing. Emotion. Memory. Suspicion. Across from him sits a defense armed with documentation, timelines, and hard evidence. And in a courtroom, those things always beat feelings. By the time the doors of the High Court closed each day, the image that remained wasn't of a triumphant prince taking on the system. It was of a man trapped inside contradictions of his own making. He demanded privacy while selling his secrets. He demanded accountability while refusing to follow courtroom rules. He spoke of shared suffering while standing alone. This trial has done something no interview, no documentary, and no memoir ever could. It stripped away the narrative control. In a court of law, storytelling doesn't win. Proof does. And what has been exposed here is the fragile foundation beneath the Sussex brand itself. A brand built on grievance, moral authority, and victimhood, now being tested in an arena where those things carry no weight without evidence to support them. The question is no longer just whether Harry will win or lose this case. The real question is what will be left of his credibility if he loses. If the judge rules that his claims are unsupported and his testimony unreliable, the verdict will reach far beyond this courtroom. Harry will no longer be seen as a man standing up to a corrupt system. He will be seen as someone who tried to control the truth, and failed. And no amount of documentaries, podcasts, or carefully produced content can overturn a legal judgment. So what do you think? Is Prince Harry bravely standing up to an unfair system? Or has he lost touch with reality and the consequences of his own choices? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated as this story continues to unfold, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because this house of cards may not be done falling yet.